Alright, well, what's up, guys? My name is Saki. You can call me Saki. I'm doing this for my psychology class, actually. And maybe you guys also have the Psychology 2E chapter textbook. So, if you want to, you could use this as. I usually use this, I use a lot of these while I'm walking to school, while I'm just on my way from classes or maybe just walking home. So you could just listen to me, and then I'll give you a pretty simplistic lecture on motivations and emotions. And I will be reading from the slide, and then I'll probably voice examples of what they are. But if they are wrong, I will correct myself, and I do apologize if they are wrong. So it take. I don't want you guys to. I'm gonna be reading off the slide, so you'll understand if if I convey it wrong, my apologies, and I'm sorry, guys. Always, you know, I'll just tell you when I'm about to say my opinion or give an analogy. So, welcome to Psychology 2E Chapter 10. This is emotions can change. This is motivation and emotion. So it says emotion can change in an instant, especially in response to an unexpected event. Surprise, fear, anger, and sadness are some independent or immediate emotions that people experience in the aftermath of April 15, 2013 Boston Marathon bombing. What are emotions, what causes them, and what is motivated by bystanders to immediately help others while other people run for safety. So yeah, and I did watch this video. Yeah, it's pretty gruesome, you know. But okay, let's get into it. So, first we have intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation is factors that arise internally and behaviors that are performed because they bring a sense of personal satisfaction. So I'm about to voice my example here. An analogy for intrinsic motivation would be anything like maybe you desire to draw, maybe you have a keen interest in drawing, so you decide that you want to draw this day, or you want to draw yourself, or you want to draw a character, and you have this intrinsic motivation to keep drawing, and maybe you want to hone your art skills, and now you have this sort of internal factor, this internal satisfaction that you want to achieve, and you want to get your end goal. So yeah, intrinsic motivation is mostly just something that you desire, mostly based off your autonomy, and mostly based off just something that you just want to do. Extrinsic motivation arises from external factors. Behaviors are performed in order to receive something from others. So extrinsic motivations are pretty much the opposite, is how I view extrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation can be doing things like maybe assignments because you want to get a good grade, you desire to get a good grade, maybe doing something to avoid a punitive measure, like maybe your mother tells you to do the chores, or she'll take away a toy. So you're a little kid and you just do some chores so you don't get your toys taken. And usually extrinsic motivation arises from punishment, reward, and compensation. So next we have over justification effect. So I'll read the over justification effect, and then I'll explain it. So intrinsic motivation is diminished when extrinsic motivation is given. Research suggests that when something we love to do, like ice skating, becomes our job, our intrinsic and extrinsic motivations to do it may change. Once we are receiving extrinsic motivation, like being paid, we may lose the motivation to do it for enjoyment. Other research suggests that the opposite, that certain types of reinforcement, such as praise, can increase intrinsic motivation. So, over justification effect simply states that intrinsic can be sort of manifested or formed into extrinsic, and intrinsic can be formed into extrinsic. So first I'm going to say, how can extrinsic be formed into intrinsic? So like it's stated in the text, maybe praise, maybe reward, maybe just immense desire, or maybe you're getting acclimated to wanting to to perform this action because of maybe what someone's told you. They've gave you that praise, that reinforcement. So now you have the desire to want to do something, or do it more, and it becomes intrinsic. So next you have extrinsic, and extrinsic can turn. You have intrinsic, and intrinsic can turn to extrinsic if you perform the action over and over again, and it becomes cumbersome and repetitive, and then it kind of just exacerbates the feeling, and it just makes it plain. It's like eating cake over and over again. That's my analogy. Eating cake over and over again, your sensory organs are going to adapt. It's not going to taste as good, and you're just going to be more disgusted by the factor of thinking about eating any more cake, and it's just not going to be desirable anymore, really, or not as desirable as it used to be. So types of reinforcements: tangible rewards appear to decrease intrinsic motivation, tangible rewards appear to increase motivation. Expectation of intrinsic reward: intrinsic motivation is more likely to decrease extrinsic reward if expected. So those are some reinforcers that can change extrinsic and intrinsic. So next we'll be moving on to the instinct theory of motivation, which is proposed by which was proposed by William James. The instinct theory of motivation is asserting that behavior is driven by instincts which aid survival. Next is proposed instincts include a mother's protection of her baby, the urge to lick sugar, and hunting prey. The theory received criticism for ignoring the role of learning and shaping in humans. And human instincts may include behaviors such as infants rooting for a nipple and sucking. So, obviously, instinct theory of motivation is just anyone's primal instinct. This is from your primal brain. This is your physiological instincts that you're going to be inclined to do. So you're going to be doing things like having that desire to eat, having that desire to feed, maybe having that desire for safety, having that desire of continuity for genetics, which is one of the reasons why mothers protect their child, to preserve continuity for genetics. You're gonna also an instinct theory of motivation. It's just mainly just getting that motive to achieve your homeostasis, and maybe homeostasis, along with homeostasis, is going to be your metabolic desire and functions. So that can be the theory of motivation. On to the next, and that was my analogy and my explanation. So the next is the drive theory of motivation. The drive theory was proposed that the maintenance of homeostasis is important in directing behavior. So deviations from homeostasis create physiological needs, resulting in psychological drive states that direct behavior to meet the needs and bring the system back to homeostasis. Emphasis on the role and the habits and patterns of behavior in which we regularly engage and play in behavior response. If a behavior successfully reduces a drive, we are more likely to engage in that behavior in the future. So what this states is, if this can retain homeostasis, if this can bring us back to that stability, if this can bring us back to that homeostasis, that stable homeostasis environment, then we're going to be more inclined, more likely to do an action in the future, and we're going to most likely use that same action to reduce that homeostasis and to reduce that motive and drive, or to achieve that homeostasis from that physiological motive and drive, or homeostatic motive and drive. So and so an example can be if you're like the baby, like maybe she wants to satiate her hunger and satiate her sugar tooth, so she eats watermelon, and she goes back to more homeostatic environment within her visceral body or system. My bad. Anyways, so the arousal theory of motivation. The arousal theory asserts that there is an optimal level of arousal that we always try to maintain. Under-aroused is becoming bored and seek of stimulation, which is apathy. Over-aroused is engaged in behaviors to reduce arousal. Research suggests that optimal arousal levels for performative is moderate arousal. So This just states that there's an optimal level for arousal. There's a certain threshold, so you're going to be found at the first state, which, like it said, it's under arousal. You're going to be bored, you're going to be apathetic, you're going to be looking around for something to do, you know, like I was actually doing earlier. I was just watching this video, of the lecture. It was kind of boring, and then I got this bright idea to do to make a video myself for lectures in the future, so I can have an example, and so I can also use this to listen to while I'm walking down the street. Or walking back home from school or in school to use. So I got that motivation, that little slide of motivation, which was at an optimal level. I wasn't too anxious about it. I wasn't thinking about it. But high anxiety would be like, maybe you're at a basketball game, maybe you're playing basketball, or maybe you're in a martial arts tournament, and you have high pressure, you have this high tension that's surrounding you, that's encompassing you all over, all these people that are staring at you, and you can feel their glare, and you can just feel their optic sensory organ just dead on your skin, and you're just getting extremely anxious. And yeah, that's how I see the arousal theory of motivation. So the concept of optimal arousal in relation to performance on task is depicted here. Performance is maximized at the optimal level of arousal, and it tapers off during under and over arousal. Okay. So Yerkes and Dodson, the optimal arousal level depends on complexity and difficulty on tasks to be performed. Yerkes and Dodson law, a task performance is best when arousal levels are in the middle range, with difficult tasks best performed under lower levels of arousal, and simple tasks best performed under higher levels of arousal. So what this states is that um, levels within the middle range performed under lower levels of arousal, like simple tasks, are usually performed at lower levels. You need lower levels of motivation, lower levels of arousal, but performing wait, no, I just lied. Wait, no. So simple tasks are best performed best with higher levels of arousal, my bad. And difficult tasks are best performed under lower levels of arousal. You don't want that anxiety, you don't want that anxiousness to cloud your judgment, to give you those little muscle fasciculations, to make you jitter and just move all over the place. You don't want that anxiety clouding your mind. So it most likely be more, you most likely want to have a lower level of anxiety, and a more optimal level threshold for difficult tasks, and obviously higher for lower tasks, because for lower tasks it's more simple. You don't have to worry too much if you're moving, or if you have this clouded judgment. It's just something, there's no need to be super anxious about it. So that's the Yerkes Dodson law. um so next is self-efficacy and social motivation. Self-efficacy is an individual's belief in their own capability to complete a task. Bandura theorized that self-efficacy plays a role in motivating behavior, and argues that motivations derived from expectations held about consequences of behaviors. Beliefs about our abilities determine what we do and goals we set for ourselves. So self-efficacy is most likely, or is encompassed around the idea of how humans tend to be more, or have more propensity to do something if we believe we can achieve it. If you believe you can achieve an endeavor, you're going to be more inclined, you're going to have more proclivity to do something if you believe that you can complete it. That's pretty much the self-efficacy theory. So, yeah. Okay, so social motives are needs for achievement, drives that accomplish and performance. Needs for affiliation encourages positive interaction with others. Needs for intimacy causes us to seek deep, meaningful relationships, and so on. So this is kind of like, sort of like the preface to the Maslow pyramid, which is literally the next slide. but needs for achievement, that drives accomplishment. So when you have that self-efficacy, that belief that you can achieve something, that you can accomplish something, you're going to get more performance, you're going to get more motive, and you're just going to be able to feel like you can grasp, like it's more palatable, like it's in your hand and you can actually reach it. So the need for affiliation encourages positive interaction with others. So you want to affiliate yourself, you want to have that social interaction so you can have yourself deemed on this level. Overall, humans need some sort of social interaction, which I don't have a lot of. But they need this social interaction. They need this affiliation with other people, and overall, it can give a positive outlook because you can obviously get a lot of positive traits from having a lot of friends and a lot of downsides, but we go into that. So need for intimacy causes us to seek deep, meaningful relationships. Humans are inclined to have continuity. They want that emotional diversity. They want to have experience, and we're innately curious. So we want to have that experience with people with the opposite gender, or even the same gender. It doesn't matter. We want that experience. We want that love. We want that feeling of being close, that tenderness. That's something that we desire. That's something that we're really inclined to do. And on top of that, not just only do we want that how could I explain this? That miscellaneous, that just flamboyance of emotion. We want that. And, it's just a ride. It's a ride that us humans are willing to take, which can go into the arousal theory, especially if you've been through a lot. But anyways, that need for intimacy is just one of the primary things that we need, and it also helps promote genetic continuity, which is something that humans also innately usually do. So here is the Maslow hierarchy of needs proposed. This was proposed by Abraham Maslow. It was a theory of motivation that spans the spectrum of motives, including biological, individual, and social. One must satisfy lower level needs before addressing the higher needs in higher levels. A person without food and water or shelter is unlikely to be focused on a relationship or what people think of them. So this states that there's more stages. There's this more like cumulative aspect of um of needs, which is pretty accurate. Physiologically, you're gonna need food, water. Um, I can't read what that says because there's a black line through my screen. But we need warmth, shelter, water, and food. That's what it says. So obviously, if you're looking at a standpoint, if you're in the point where you're on the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy needs, you have this food and you don't have food, water, and shelter, you're not going to be concerned about safety, employment, and assets. You're going to be concerned about your food and water. That's your safety. That's going to be your shelter and warmth. And your shelter and warmth, that's going to be your safety first. You're not concerned about family relationships, most likely, or is what the pyramid states. You're not going to be concerned about family, friendships, and intimacy because you need to be concerned about if you're going to eat tomorrow. You're definitely not concerned about self-worth, most likely, or accomplishing confidence at if you don't have the simple needs. And self-actualization, you're definitely not there. You just know you're not there. So basically what this states is you're going to need food and water. Once you get food and water, you're going to need safety and employment and assets. So you're going to need that money yield. You're going to need to have that insure. You're going to need to you're going to need to ensure that you have that stability, ensure that you have those assets and resources to keep yourself afloat. Next is social, which is family, friendship, and intimacy and belonging. You're going to make sure you want to have a good social, you're going to want a high social standard, or not a high social standard, but you're going to want a good social level that you can stand on. You're going to want a nice social level that you can sit on. You're going to want that intimacy. You're going to want that belonging. And you're going to be worried about your family and friendships because you don't have to worry about all the other primary necessities that we need in life. And after you're not worried about that, you're going to be worried about self-worth and accomplishment. You're going to say, who am I? What am I going to do in life? What accomplishments am I going to make? You're going to have this self-reverence. You're going to have your self-esteem. That's going to be your primary worth. And finally, is your self-actualization. That's your inner fulfillment. That's going to be you feeling like you've reached your goals, like you've reached your endeavors, like you've achieved everything that you could, which mostly, I'd want to say that's for generativity. That's like mostly something you experience when you're older. But actually, a lot of people don't even experience inner fulfillment in the first place, which is, it makes sense. I mean, like, think about that. All your endeavors have been completed. Like that's high. That's that's pretty drastic. So next we'll move on to hunger and eating, physiological mechanisms, metabolism and body weight, obesity, and eating disorders. Excuse me. So hunger and eating are regulated by a complex interplay of hunger and satiety or satiety. My bad. Signals that are integrated in the brain. So an empty stomach, when before eating, you're gonna have an empty stomach, and then you're gonna have your stomach's gonna start contract. You're gonna get this hunger pain. You're gonna release these hunger chemical cells that are messengers to your brain, and these hormonal chemical cells are called leptin, which will be introduced in the next slide. You're gonna get that signal of initiation to feed. You're gonna have low blood glucose levels. Your pancreas and liver will generate chemical signals that induce hunger and initiate feeding. So obviously you're gonna have this from lack of nutrients within your blood. As stated, blood sugar levels and blah blah blah. I really don't need to say anything more. So satiation is the feeling of fullness and satisfaction, causing eating behaviors to stop. So you're going to increase blood glucose levels. Your pancreas and liver are going to send signals to your stomach to shut that hungry eating off, or they're going to send signals to your brain. My bad. Next, the food's going to pass through your gastrointestinal tract. The satiety signals are going to be sent to the brain. You're going to feel that sense of fullness. You're going to be deprived of that sense of vacancy within your intestines. Fat cells will release, which are called leptin, which is a satiety hormone. Next, you're going to have your gene-environment interactions and my bad. Metabolism and body weight. So factors of affecting body weight. You're gonna have the gene environment interactions, and the number of calories consumed versus the number of calories burned in daily activities, and your metabolic rate. So these are gonna be the factors that are gonna be pretty much predicated upon you losing that weight. So metabolic rate is the amount of energy that is expected in a given time period. So it varies between individuals. People with high metabolic rate burn off calories more easily than those with lower rates of metabolism. I mean, you most likely heard of lower metabolism, higher metabolism. This is how it works. So regulation of body weight is this. There's this thing called the set point theory, and each individual has an ideal body weight set point, which is a resistance to change. It's a set point that is genetically determined. Efforts to move the weight significantly from the set point are resisted by compensatory changes in energy and intake expenditure based on the observation that people's weight generally fluctuates within a narrow margin. Fails to account for the influence of social and environmental factors. So there's going to be environmental factors like if you're primarily represented in a household that has a lot of junk food and high calories and high sugar levels, high glucose, high cholesterol, high saturated fat, you're going to be most likely encompassed around this need to eat these very bad foods. And obviously if it's in your genetics to have this sort of predisposition, if it's in your genetics, if it's embedded in your genes, and you kind of have no change, maybe it's a disorder, it could be abundance of factors. But based on observation, people's weight generally fluctuates through a narrow margin. As stated, environmental factors, that maintenance of homeostasis is also a pretty big factor of maintaining that weight. And that's pretty much it, and that is a set point theory. So next we have obesity. So 2 to 3 U.S. adults struggle with issues related to being overweight. The chart shows how adults' BMI is calculated. Individuals find their height on the y-axis and their weight on the x-axis to determine their BMI. So 25 to 29.9 is overweight, over 30 is obese, and over 40 is morbidly obese. So, as well as factors such as genetics and energy intake expenditure, social economic status, and physical environments can contribute to obesity. So, obviously, if you have a with socioeconomic status, you're not going to be you're not going to maybe you're not going to be able to get foods that are high priced, and you're going to want to maintain this sort of frugal lifestyle because you have lack of money and lack of profit to expend money or to have the proper expenditure to grab or achieve these healthier foods. So you're dependent on these lower foods, these pretty much lower level foods, and these maybe ultra processed meals, high saturated fat meals, and etc. Next we have obesity, which the health risks are cardiovascular disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, breast cancer, infertility, arthritis, liver disease, sleep apnea, and colon cancer. This is a combination. Weight reduction can be a combination of diet and exercise. So, gastric banding surgery creates a small pouch of the stomach, reducing the size of the stomach that can be used for digestion. Obviously, if you reduce the size of the stomach, you're going to reduce the nutrients and etc. and the glucose levels and the triglyceride levels and fat and adipose tissue levels, which is going to contribute to weight reduction. Next we have satiating, or no, my bad, eating disorders. So we have bulimia nervosa, which involves engaging in eating behavior that follows in attempts to compensate for the large amount of food being consumed. So there's a stage of compensation, or there's a stage of mass eating, and then there's this state of purging, which is compensation, and it includes vomiting, laxatives, and excessive exercise. So health consequences can be included like kidney failure, heart failure, and tooth decay, psychological problems like depression, anxiety, increased risk of substance abuse, and etc. For anorexia nervosa, you maintain a body weight that's below average through starvation and or exercise. You have a distorted body image, which results in body dysmorphia, and you view yourself as fat even though you're not. So your health consequences can be including bone loss, heart failure, kidney failure, amenorrhea, which is cessation of the menstrual period, reduced function of gonads, in some cases of death, psychological disorders or problems like anxiety disorder, mood disorder, and substance abuse. So, oh my God, can I go to the next slide? So next we have eating disorder. Wait, hold up. Okay. Sorry, y'all. I'm studying too as I do this. I'm studying too as I read this. So, just so y'all know. So that's why I went back. Okay, so Caucasian females ages 15 to 19 from Western societies are most at risk in the population. Many blame social media for its message of the thin ideal. Genetics may also predispose people to these disorders. Low self-esteem and other mental illnesses, life transitions, stress, experience such as abuse and bullying, personality types, perfectionism, and family issues. So young women in our society are inundated with the images of extremely thin models. So obviously, if something so ubiquitous like these thin models with this beauty standard and this beauty type, it's obviously going to develop low self-esteem, teenagers or individuals, and it's going to create depression, maybe a sense of maybe self-contempt, and you're just going to view yourself in a more censure perspective and just lower your self-esteem. So those can be the major contributions to this modeling. So sexual behaviors, physiological mechanisms. Kinsey's research, Masters and Johnson's research, sexual orientation and gender identity. So, the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus plays an important part in motivating behavior, including sex. Lesions to the medial preoptic area of the hypothalamus completely disrupted the male's rat's ability to engage in sexual behavior, but it does not affect the sexual motivation he will seek to gain access to sexual receptive females. This suggests that the ability to engage in sexual behavior and motivation to do so are mediated by different systems in the brain. So the lesions in the preoptic area just pretty much disrupted the male rat's sexual ability, but the male rat still has this sexual motivation and still seeks to gain sex with sexual receptive females. So it's quite weird, honestly. So he can engage in behavior, but he doesn't have the motivation. Or wait, he can engage in behavior, but he has the motivation. My bad. So hormones secreted by the endocrine glands, which are testosterone and fluid sexual behavior and other behavior. Physiological mechanisms, the amygdala and the nucleus accumbens, involved in motivation for sexual behavior, but do not affect the ability to engage in it. So, damage in rats results in decreased motivation to engage in the sexual behavior, while the ability to do so is still intact. Wait, what? Bruh. So, damage in rats decreased the motivation to engage in the behavior, but they still had the ability to have intercourse. So the damage to these involves rupturing the motivation to the sexual behavior, but it doesn't affect the ability to engage in it. So Kinsey's research in the response to the lack of empirical based information on sex during the late 1940s, Dr. Alfred Kinsey initiated a large-scale survey. Behaviors thought to be rare were revealed to be much more than common and previously thought, influential in shaping the future research of human sexual behavior. So the findings were women are interested and experienced in sex as men, or as interested in experience. So both males and females masturbate without negative health consequences. Homosexuals are fairly common. The Kinsey scale used to categorize an individual's sexual orientation. So this was Master and John's research. They conducted a study with the response during sexual behavior and observed people engaging in sexual behaviors measured by physiological variables, blood pressure and respiration rates, measured sexual arousal, vaginal lubrication, and penile tumescence. So number one is excitement. So you're gonna get that linear slope, and then you're gonna hit that plateau. You're gonna increase swelling in blood flow for your labia minora in females, and you're gonna have this pre-ejaculation fluid for both, actually, for both. So after that, you're gonna reach your state of even higher excitement, I'd say, but it's not called excitement, it's orgasm. You're gonna reach orgasm, and then after orgasm, you're gonna reach resolution and return to your unaroused state. So next we have the sexual orientation, emotions, and erotic attraction towards other individuals. A relatively stable characteristic of a person, not a choice. Between 3 to 10% of the adult population identifies as homosexual. What makes someone heterosexual and homosexual previously thought to be caused by different socialization and familiar. Yeah. I think it's familiar. I don't know. Experiences, but research shows that these experiences can be very similar in homosexuals and heterosexuals. So genetic and biological mechanisms. Research has found differences in the brain structure and the function between heterosexuals and homosexuals. Gender identity, one's sense of being a male or female. In most cases, our gender identifies corresponds to the biological sex, but not always. Gender dysphoria is the diagnosis described individuals who do not identify with the gender that most people who assumed they were. This must persist for at least 6 months, and it must result in significant distress or dysfunction to meet the diagnosis criteria. So, transgender hormone therapy is the use of hormones to make one's body look more like the opposite sex. So, I'm just going to head on to emotion because this video is getting really long. Theories of emotion, the biology of emotion, facial expressions, and recognition of emotion. So, mood, prolonged, less intense affective state. It does not occur in response to something we experience and may be consciously recognized or intentional. It may not be consciously recognized or intentional, my bad. So, an emotion is a subjective state of being that we often use to describe our feelings relative to the intense and occurs in response to an experience, consciously experienced and intentional. So, an emotion is more of a transient state. It's more one that's output or input and then output. So we experience something, we input it, and then after we react with our facial muscles and our facial reaction. And next we have mood, which is just prolonged, intense, affective states. So it could be prolonged emotion. A mood could be just this prolonged feeling that sometimes can be innate, and usually it doesn't occur in something we experience. So emotions, toddlers can cycle through emotions quickly, being extremely happy one and extremely sad the next. Theories of emotion. Emotion arises from physiological arousal. You see a snake, your heart and respiration increase. You get feelings of fear. In the canon birth theory, physiological arousal and emotion experience occur simultaneously, yet independently, and they occur at the same time, but they're not independent of each other. See a snake, physiological arousal, and feel fear. Empirical findings, individuals with spinal cord injuries incapable of receiving autonomic feedback could still experience emotion, but in some it was less intense. Suppression or facial expression of emotion lowered the intensity of emotions experienced. These findings suggest that physiological arousal is not necessary to experience an emotion, but increases the intensity. So, simply stated, empirical findings suggest that an emotion can be out an emotion that's taken in and outlaid intensifies the physiological experience rather than sort of embolds or consolidates it or represents it. Okay. So, Singer two-factor theory. Emotions are composed of two factors, physiological and cognitive. Physiological arousal is interpreted in the context leading to the emotional experience. You see snake, physiological arousal and cognitive assessment of the situation labels arousal as fear or experiencing fear. So you're going to have this physiological arousal, you're going to start sweating, or your palms are going to start sweating, your blood's going to start rushing, maybe your pupils will dilate, and you're going to have this cognitive implication that's like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. There's a snake in front of me. So, Lazarus is a cognitive mediation theory. Emotions are determined by our appraisal of stimulus. Unlike the Schachter Center model, the appraisal occurs before the label, and appraisal is immediate and unconscious. So, theories of emotion. So you see, here's a representation of the theory, which is arousal in the snake. You get your heart starts pounding and sweating. You start to get fear. Here's the cannon bird theory. You have an arousal from a snake, and your heart starts pounding and sweating, and you feel the fear. So in James Lange theory, you have the physiological function, and then the emotional function, and then for the arousal in snake, for the if I'm saying this wrong, I'm sorry. I'm really bad at pronouncing some names. Singer two-factor theory, which stated that the arousal happens the heart starts pounding and sweating, you get the cognitive label, I'm scared, and then you get fear. So the Lazarus cognitive mediational theory proposed that you get this sort of appraisal, and then you get fear. Your heart starts pounding, and then your heart starts your heart starts beating. My bad. So the limbic system is involved in mediating emotional response and memory. The hypothalamus is involved in activating of the sympathetic nervous system, a part of the emotional reaction. The thalamus is a sensory relay center where neurons project to both the amygdala and the higher cortical regions for further processing. The amygdala plays a role in processing emotional information and sending it on the cortical structures. The hippocampus integrates emotion and experiences and cognition. So, shortly, the hypothalamus is just involved in the sympathetic nervous system, which is mainly the emotional reaction. The thalamus is just a sensory relay center where it relays the cognition and it relays the emotion and sends it through your body. It just relays, it projects those neurons, it takes in the senses and relays those senses across your body and pretty much puts you probably into your sympathetic state. The amygdala plays a role in inducing your emotional reactions such as fear, and the hippocampus just integrates that emotional experience with cognition, so it's going to sort of consolidate the experience as well, and it's going to integrate that sort of cognition and that cognitive label. The amygdala has been a primary target of research concerning biological basis of emotions, especially fear and anxiety. The amygdala is composed of various subnuclei, including the basolateral complex and the central nucleus, my bad. So the basolateral complex has dense connections with different sensory areas of the brain. It's critical for classical conditioning and attaching emotional value to learning, processing, and memory. So I really like to think of this as the classical conditioning part of the amygdala. I'm concerned with learning and emotional value and connection with memory. So the central nucleus is involved in attention and has connections with the hypothalamus and various brain stems areas to regulate the autonomic nervous system and the endocrine system's activities. So this regulates the autonomic nervous system, such as being involved with smooth muscles, such as maybe blood vessel dilation, maybe heart contractile tissue, extra heart contractions, maybe eye dilation, and focusing those endocrine hormones to disseminate through your body and give you that reaction and sort of pump that adrenaline to reach your sympathetic nervous system. So the facial expressions and recognition of emotion, cultural display rule, culturally specific standards cultural specific standards govern the types of frequencies of displays of emotions that are acceptable. Individuals from the U.S. express negative emotions like fear, anger, and disgust both alone and in the presence of others, while individuals in Japan only express these emotions while alone. Despite varying cultures, display rules, recognition, and production of the same facial features and facial expressions, certain emotions are universal. So here is the 7 universal facial expressions of emotion. You have happiness, surprise, sadness, fright, disgust, contempt, and anger. So these are the 7 universal expressions. Everybody can understand how you feel when you express these emotions. And I'd say if you ever want to express your emotions to someone who cannot understand you and you guys have a pretty thick language barrier, I'd say you could definitely convey your emotions with your facial muscles. But yeah, that's going to be it. I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. I find it that I do end up doing a lot of tripping over my words, so I really apologize for tripping over my words, guys. I don't know. I don't really do this. Like you said, maybe I have the over arousal motivation. Maybe I'm just extremely anxious, but yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed the lecture. Have a good day, and I will keep making more of these past 10. And if you guys want to see more lectures, for your school or to help you study or just to watch it, then I got you. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Peace out.